Alright, so, imagine this. You're standing in the middle of the Egyptian desert. It's hot enough to cook an egg on the ground. And right in front of you is a 480-foot-tall mountain of limestone blocks, cut with surgical precision, stacked neatly into the most perfect triangular shape humanity has ever seen. And then someone leans over and says, "Yeah, dude, this was built like 4,500 years ago, with copper chisels and some wooden sleds." Now, no offense to the ancient Egyptians, because they were geniuses. But if you've ever tried putting together IKEA furniture with modern tools, you'll understand why some people might raise an eyebrow. The Great Pyramid of Giza isn't just some random pile of rocks either. It's 2.5 million individual stones, some weighing upwards of 80 tons, stacked, aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.067 degrees, and built so precisely that you can't even slide a piece of paper between some of the stones. And we're supposed to believe this was knocked out by a bunch of guys in loincloths dragging rocks across the desert? Sure, totally believable. Now, mainstream historians will tell you, very calmly and confidently, that the Egyptians built the pyramids all by themselves. No aliens, no lost civilizations, no ancient vibrational tech, just good old-fashioned human ingenuity, sweat, and a horrifying amount of manual labor. And listen, they have a lot of good points. Evidence of massive worker villages has been found near the pyramids. Skeletons of laborers show signs of heavy workload injuries. Like, "Oh God, my back is broken in half" injuries. There's graffiti inside some of the pyramid chambers. Literally just ancient Egyptian workers tagging the walls like, "Team Pharaoh was here, 2560 BC. But for every piece of evidence supporting the mainstream view, you've got at least one person claiming the pyramids weren't tombs at all, but giant energy devices. You've got others arguing that the precision of the construction is too good for ancient tech, that it hints at some kind of lost high technology humanity forgot about. And of course, the classic, "Bro, it was aliens." Because, let's be honest, no matter how much science you throw at it, deep down, there's something in all of us that loves the idea that ancient people had access to something we don't understand. That maybe, just maybe, history is hiding secrets bigger than we can imagine. And look, is it likely that extraterrestrials came across the galaxy just to help some Egyptians stack rocks? Maybe not. If I'm an intergalactic traveler, I'm probably not spending my vacation days playing Forklift Simulator in 100-degree heat. Or maybe, now that we're talking about it, it actually sounds fun. But is it possible that there's more to the story than what we've been told? Well, that's where things get interesting. Because when you start digging, not literally, you'll get arrested. But digging through historical records, ancient myths, architectural anomalies, and even mathematical coincidences hidden inside the pyramids themselves, you start to realize that either the Egyptians were operating at a level we still don't fully grasp, or they had help from something, or someone, whose knowledge we've lost to time. So today, we're going to dive headfirst into the world of pyramid conspiracies. We'll look at the evidence, both for and against the idea that the Egyptians built the pyramids all by themselves. We'll explore the mainstream theories, the fringe theories, and the government doesn't want you to know theories. And by the end of this video, maybe you'll agree with the experts. Which means you'll agree that they were clearly built by the aliens. Let's get into it. Alright, so let's start with the boring answer. The one your high school history teacher would have told you while you tried not to fall asleep on your desk. According to mainstream archaeology, the pyramids were built by, get ready for it, a whole lot of people over a long time, using pretty basic tools and some wild engineering tricks. First off, the labor force. You've probably heard that the pyramids were built by slaves, right? Wrong. That's a Hollywood myth. Thank you, Cecil B. DeMille and every movie about Moses ever made. Archaeological evidence, like burial sites near the pyramids filled with what look like worker skeletons, suggests that the builders were actually skilled laborers. Think of them like the ancient Egyptian version of construction workers. They were fed, housed, paid, and judging by some of the remains, worked so hard their bones basically begged for mercy. Imagine clocking into work every day, knowing your job was to haul rocks heavier than your dad's SUV across the desert. And you don't even get an air-conditioned lunch break. Just bread, beer, and the hope that you don't get crushed by limestone that day. Now, how they actually built the pyramids. That's where the theories get spicy. The most accepted theory is something called the ramp theory. Basically, the Egyptians would have built massive ramps, either straight, zigzagging around the pyramid, or spiraling upward, and dragged the stones up using sleds and ropes. Simple, right? Just build a 400-foot ramp out of mud and stone, drag an 80-ton block up it, and hope it doesn't flatten the guy pulling in front. Easy. And believe it or not, there's some real science behind it. Ancient tomb paintings show workers pouring water onto sand in front of sleds, which would reduce friction by about 50%. Which is clever. Ancient Egyptians basically figured out desert physics long before some nerd in a lab coat put it in a textbook. As for tools, here's where it gets even more insane. The Egyptians were working with copper chisels and stone hammers. Copper, the same stuff you find in cheap electrical wiring today, is not exactly known for being tougher than, say, limestone or granite, which means every time they hit a rock, their tools wore down like a mechanical pencil in the hands of an anxious 8th grader. They would have had to constantly resharpen or replace tools, meaning the entire operation was basically a never-ending cycle of hit rock, fix chisel, cry, repeat. But even with that, they pulled it off. And not just that. The Egyptians weren't just stacking rocks like toddlers playing Jenga. They were master architects. The Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to true north. It's designed with precise internal passageways. And the dimensions of the pyramid somehow encode mathematical constants like pi and the golden ratio. These people weren't cavemen. They had astronomy. They had engineering. They had math that would make my high school geometry teacher weep with joy. We tend to look back at ancient civilizations like they were a bunch of dudes fumbling around in the dark. But the truth is, they were terrifyingly smart. Smart enough to figure out stuff we still scratch our heads over today. So, according to mainstream archaeology, no aliens, no death rays, no ancient iPads, just a brutal amount of manpower, clever tricks, and a culture that could out-organize the best project manager you've ever met. But, even if all that's true, there's still a lot about the pyramids that doesn't quite add up, which is where things start to get weird. Because no matter how many textbooks you read, no matter how many archaeologists patiently explain the ramp theory, there's a stubborn part of the internet, and, let's be honest, a stubborn part of all of us, that looks at the Great Pyramid and says, yeah, okay. But are we sure Steve and the boys pulled this off with some sticks and rocks? So here they come, the conspiracy theories. And oh man, there are so many. First up, the classic aliens. Now, if you've spent any amount of time on the History Channel at 2 a.m., you know this one. The theory goes like this. The pyramids are so massive, so precise, so astronomically aligned, that there's no way primitive humans could have built them alone. Clearly, extraterrestrials must have zipped down from Alpha Centauri, looked around, and thought, hey, you know what this planet needs? Some really big triangles. Supporters of the alien theory point to things like the size and weight of the stones, like how did they move those? The perfect alignment to true north, which even modern builders struggle with, and the fact that similar pyramid-like structures appear all around the world, from Egypt to Mexico to Indonesia, even though these cultures supposedly had no contact. And to be fair, when you really think about it, what are the odds that civilizations all over the world just coincidentally decided that big triangle was the move? It does raise some eyebrows. But then again, triangles are kind of the easiest shape to stack when you're trying not to get crushed by rocks. So, maybe not entirely a mystery. Next, lost ancient technology. This one's a personal favorite because it doesn't need little green men. Just the idea that humans were way more advanced in the past than we give them credit for. Some people believe the Egyptians, or even civilizations before them, developed technology we've since forgotten. Not iPhones and Teslas, but things like advanced stone-cutting tools, complex cranes, or even some form of energy manipulation. One wild idea that pops up a lot is sonic levitation, the theory that ancient builders somehow used sound waves to lift massive stones, like singing rocks into the air, which, if true, would be both awesome and terrifying. There's even some ancient texts that hint at sound being powerful. But, full disclosure, a lot of those translations are kind of sketchy at best. It's a little like that one friend who says, if you read it upside down and squint really hard, it says the ancients had anti-gravity machines. Yeah, maybe. Or maybe it says, Steve owes me 6 goats. Then there's the Atlantean master builders theory. This one ties the pyramids to the mythical lost city of Atlantis. The idea that an ancient global civilization, wiped out by catastrophe, once had technology far beyond what we currently understand. According to this theory, the survivors of Atlantis spread out across the world, bringing knowledge of pyramid construction with them, which, if nothing else, would explain why cultures separated by oceans and continents all seem to be obsessed with stacking rocks in pointy shapes. Of course, the evidence for Atlantis is basically, Plato mentioned it once. But when has a complete lack of evidence ever stopped a good conspiracy theory? And finally, my personal favorite, ancient giants. Yup, some folks believe that giant humans, like literal 10 to 15 foot tall giants, helped build the pyramids. Because if you're trying to drag a 60-ton granite slab up a ramp, having a team of Shaquille O'Neal-sized dudes would definitely speed things up. There's even old newspaper clippings from the 1800s claiming giant bones were found all over the world. Problem is, most of those stories are either hoaxes, misinterpretations, or just straight up, guy found a big cow bone and got excited. But still, giant construction workers swinging giant copper chisels does sound kinda metal. So, what's the truth? Are the pyramids just the result of incredible human ingenuity? Or is there a missing chapter in history? One filled with forgotten technology, ancient civilizations, or something else entirely? Well, that's what we're going to explore. Because while the mainstream explanations make a lot of sense, there are a lot of strange little details that don't fit so neatly into the official story. And if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that sometimes the truth is way, way stranger than fiction. Alright, so, let's say you're still team the Egyptians were just really good at math and rocks. Fair enough. But there's a few, let's call them quirks, about the Great Pyramid that make even the most rational minds do a double take. Because the deeper you look into it, the more it feels like the universe is playing a practical joke on us. First up, the pyramid's alignment. The Great Pyramid isn't just vaguely pointing north. It's aligned to true north with a margin of error so small, it's basically surgical. We're talking 0.067 degrees off, which, to put it in perspective, is like trying to shoot an arrow from New York and hit a bullseye in London. And here's the kicker. Today, with GPS satellites and lasers, we still struggle to build stuff that precisely aligned. And yet, 4,500 years ago, with nothing but eyeballs, stars, and what was basically a protractor made out of sticks, they nailed it. How? Well, mainstream historians suggest they used the stars, specifically tracking the circumpolar stars, and made adjustments over time. But still, at some point you have to respect the grind. Because, there was at least one dude out there getting roasted by his coworkers every time he measured wrong by a few inches. Nice going, Thutmose. Now the whole pyramid's crooked. Guess we're building it again. No lunch for you. Next, the Orion's Belt connection. Here's where things get extra spooky. If you look at the 3 pyramids of Giza from above, they aren't in a perfect straight line. One of them, the Pyramid of Menkaure, is slightly offset. And if you compare the layout of the pyramids to the 3 stars in Orion's Belt, boom, the positions match almost perfectly. Some researchers argue that the pyramids were built as a reflection of the stars, a sort of cosmic mirror on Earth. And it doesn't stop there. The ancient Egyptians believed that Orion was associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife and rebirth. So it's possible they designed the entire Giza plateau as a massive religious monument, not just to honor the gods, but to align themselves with the heavens. Or, maybe they just really liked the way 3 dots looked next to each other. Who's to say? Now, let's talk about the pyramid's math. You ready for your brain to hurt? If you take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by 2 times pii, that little math thing involving circles, you get a number shockingly close to the perimeter of the pyramid's base. In other words, height times 2 times pi equals the base perimeter, which, if you're keeping score at home, means that whoever built the pyramid either 1. Accidentally discovered pi thousands of years before it was officially discovered, or 2. Knew way more about geometry and circles than we give them credit for. And there's more. If you divide the length of each side by the height, you get close to the golden ratio. That same magical number that shows up in seashells, hurricanes, and the layout of your favorite Instagram models' faces. It's almost like the pyramid wasn't just designed for show. It was engineered to encode universal mathematical principles. And again, with copper chisels, and string, and the absolute audacity of human ambition. Last but not least, the pyramid's location. Fun fact, the Great Pyramid sits almost perfectly at the geographic center of Earth's landmass. Yeah, if you flattened all the continents out, took all the land on the globe, and tried to balance it on a pin, the pyramid would be almost exactly dead center. Now, the odds of that happening by accident? Astronomically low. Which raises the question, were the Egyptians just absurdly good at geography? Or was there some deeper knowledge at play? Because last I checked, they didn't exactly have Google Maps in 2500 BC. So, coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe. The ancient Egyptians knew things we've forgotten. Knowledge lost to time, washed away by history, eroded like the very stones they used to touch the stars. Either way, whether you believe they were superhuman geniuses, inheritors of lost technology, or just very determined dudes with a lot of free time, one thing's clear. The Great Pyramid is not just an old pile of rocks. It's a riddle, a message, a monument to a time when humanity, against all odds, dared to reach for the impossible. And the deeper you look, the weirder it gets. So, could the Egyptians have built the pyramids by themselves? Honestly, probably. They had the brains, the manpower, and the stubborn determination to make it happen, even if it meant hauling rocks the size of small houses across the desert for decades. But at the same time, when you start looking at the precision, the math, the cosmic alignments, it gets harder to just shrug and say, they were just really good at stacking things. Maybe the real truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe they were smarter, tougher, and more connected to the universe than we've ever given them credit for. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a piece of the puzzle we haven't found yet. Either way, one thing's for sure. The pyramids aren't just giant tombs. They're monuments, not just to kings, but to human curiosity. And no matter how many thousands of years pass, they still make us wonder, how the hell did they do that? Thanks for watching. And if you liked this video, feel free to stick around, because trust me, we're just getting started.